y'all. So this is part 2 of our little Bridging the Gap series between exotic keepers, pet parents, and veterinarians. So once again, I'm joined by the fabulous Dr. Fronefield. And so this next one is definitely another big one on the list for me that I get asked, especially at different herp shows. And what we want to cover in today's video is more about what makes a vet qualified to see exotics and how do you find them? Because I'll be the first to admit, they're not super easy to find. You know, being in Texas and especially the Houston area, you know, usually the more populous the city is, the more luck you're going to have finding one. But if you live in, you know, Laramie, Wyoming, you may have a hard time finding one. So I understand the unique challenges across the country with that. So y'all met him in the last video. Very experienced vet of, you know, only a couple years.
Just a couple.
So let's start things off with, as a boarded exotic vet, one that owns your own practice. How long have you owned this practice?
I've owned the practice since 95.
So once again, a few years.
Couple of years, yep.
Almost as long as I've been alive.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So, yep.
That's right there. Sorry.
So in your professional opinion, what do you think makes a vet qualified to really see exotics? Because it's certainly not for everybody.
It's not. So I think one of the things that will help is finding a veterinarian who has a passion for it, right? So you can have a passion and not be qualified. But you have to start with a passion if you're going to be qualified. So if you're in Laramie, Wyoming, right, and you find somebody, if that person has an interest, sometimes, I'll tell you, sometimes owners are educating veterinarians, right? Not uncommon, right? If you're in a big city like we are, right? So now you're saying, I've got a collection of veterinarians I can pick and choose. Right. So that's a different setup. So if you're looking for someone who's qualified, that's a little bit of a tough question, but the places to look would be people who are veterinarians who are members of the either board specialty, like I am of American Board of Veterinary Practitioners. You can go under board specialty, look under your species, which would be, in this case, look under your specific group, right? Avian or small mammal or reptile. And I need a veterinarian near me, and you can look it up that way. Members of the board specialty, people who are boarded in medicine, have met a certain standard and have proven certain skills. Right. That doesn't mean that there aren't people who have equal skills that didn't go through the hoops to get board certified, right? So you're, as an owner, you're figuring out, okay, are you as good as a boarded person but didn't go through the hoops? Or did you not go through the hoops and you couldn't go through the hoops even if you wanted to, right? So look for someone who has a passion, talk to them. Check your Association of Avian Veterinarians. So board specialty is much less common. So then you go to someone who's a member of the Association of Avian Veterinarians for birds, or AV, right, reptile and amphibian veterinarians, and then the ECM, which is exotic companion animal. And there's 3 relatively large veterinary groups, national groups or international groups, that have veterinarians sign up that have a particular interest in that group of animals. Right, so like in this practice, we're members of all 3, right? Because we have an interest in all 3.
And that's because y'all are the best.
That's exactly what I was going to say. No, I think there's a lot of veterinarians that do a lot of good work. Right. The challenge is finding someone who can fit your needs. I think if you look out across the country, in all fairness, I think a lot of very talented owners oftentimes bring information to veterinarians, and the veterinarians take the information and they go to either a veterinary information network or their books or their colleagues, or they call here, or they call people they know, and then they start getting better. So the next time you come in, they're better, right? So I think you got to find someone with a passion for that group of animals, and then look at the qualifications, see what they're members of, and kind of space that from there. When you said that, I was thinking about the whole country. I think, when I first started, you always hear those stories. When I first started, I learned so much from breeders of birds, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this thing, right? So I learned scads and stuff.
And so, like we touched on the last video, if you watched the introduction to all of this, and like he just said, it's that unrealistic expectation that y'all have to know everything. Yeah. And I know it's frustrating. I've had several people reach out to me asking about the species that I work with.
Right.
And it's kind of that mutual respect between the group of everybody between the medical providers, the people producing the animals, or that, like myself, literally share your home with these animals and have studied and researched them for years, and then just the person that likes that animal and keeps them as a pet. And so, like Dr. Fronefield said, a lot of times you may not necessarily find a boarded veterinarian, but I've certainly known several veterinarians that breed numerous species themselves,
right.
And they're very talented, very knowledgeable with them. There's some in Houston. I know you've talked to me about different reptile vets as well.
Yeah.
And those are like unicorns, guys. They're very rare treasure in the hobby.
Yeah, and you can talk to breeders, right? You talk to breeders and people who are out there in the community that have used veterinarians, and oftentimes they can give you some insight as to skill sets.
Yes. And one other thing I'll mention as well that I've seen help a lot of people, especially if you are in a more rural area. Yeah, social media is at our fingertips these days. There's a Facebook group for anything in the world. I'm in several of them. I've seen a ton of people ask on there, hey, I'm located in Nebraska. And sure enough, there's some person that's on there that's like, oh yeah, I am too. This is the vet that I've used for 20 years, so great. So don't be afraid to reach out to other vet clinics and see if they have, some advice as to who to go to. Like he said, different breeders, different pet parents, and go utilize those little Facebook groups to your advantage, guys. They can be invaluable for people that are really trying to seek best care for their animal, because we understand it is incredibly challenging to find.
I've been around long enough now where a lot of times they come to me, so the people who are boarded, I know most of them, right? So, but they're spread out across the country. So most veterinarians, if you're going to one right now, know a veterinarian potentially that's either near you or maybe you can get stepping stones, right? I can get you closer.
Yep. And so this is possibly a little bit more of a controversial subject, but I do think it's important to note, because I've heard this from a lot of my breeder friends, especially in like the reptile and amphibian trade show circuit. There are veterinarians that will see exotics that maybe necessarily shouldn't.
Yeah.
And so do you have any advice on not only just finding a veterinarian like we just talked about, but how to really know if you can trust them with your exotic? Because there are a lot of really great veterinarians out there. There's a lot of people like you just said. That's one of the things I always admired and respected about you, is you are incredibly knowledgeable and gifted at what you do, but you'll be the first person to admit if you don't know something.
Right.
It's just human nature. Not everybody's going to be like that. So do you have any tips or advice on maybe vetting the vet, so to speak?
So, of course, going online will help, right? Reviews. I think the other part is meet them before you need them, right? Go in, see the clinic, see if they have like something simple like a gram scale, right? If you go into a clinic that's going to do exotic animals, they don't have a gram scale. I mean, not that should be a toggle necessarily, but to me, I would be alarmed.
It's a very basic piece of equipment.
If I didn't have the scale to weigh this critter, I would think maybe this is maybe not where I need to be, right?
You're not going to weigh one of my dog dogs on your pound scale up front you weigh dogs on. So.
So there's a couple things. Go and visit them, see if they have the ability to hospitalize your exotic animal or handle it. They have special equipment. Like I said, gram scale is so basic. A veterinarian can get into exotic animal medicine with, a couple $1,000s worth of stuff, but then the rest is between their ears, right? They got to figure out how to work with these things. But I would go talk to them before you need them, see what their skill is in your species, right? What do you think? Or are they willing to put the time in to learn about it? I've had clients bring in animals and a book on them, which I think is hysterical, right? It was a wallaby. I had someone bring in, here's a wallaby and here's a book on monotremes. Thank you very much. And they said when I leave, I'm going to take the book. I'm like, okay. It was pretty funny because they left and I took the book.
At least they're realistic. They know, like, hey, I'm a wallaby. This is not an animal we're going to see every day.
They're looking for someone who is willing to take it on, right? And so, and not like you take it on, here's a book to help you.
Right.
I'm like, sweet. Right? You can't, not all of them can do that because it's not a book on everything, but it's fun. I mean, that kind of stuff's fun to me.
And I think because I've been on the side of all of this. I've been on the side behind the scenes where I'm working on these animals with y'all. I've been in the rooms as a client bringing these weird animals to y'all. And I'm also the breeder, often recommending veterinarians to other pet owners or people that are purchasing animals from me. One thing that I have found tends to work before I moved here, obviously, like when I was in college, things like that outside the Houston area, is don't be afraid to kind of test or quiz any vet clinic that you go to. You know, if they say, oh yeah, we'll see your blue-tongued skink, you know, kind of feel them out. Ask them some basic husbandry questions, you know, like, oh, I'm keeping my blue tongue at, you know, 50% humidity. Is that right? You know, it's got stuck shed. What should I do? And if they're kind of scratching their head about that and not openly honest with you,
what's like shed? What's
right.
shed? Wait, hold on.
Right, exactly. And just kind of feel them out like that. And I think he brought up an excellent point of just go to them and meet them before you meet them. Because y'all, like we touched about on the first video, you really want somebody that's experienced, well-versed, has the appropriately trained staff, the appropriate equipment to work on your exotics in an emergency situation. That's not the time to test a new veterinarian's level of expertise and then go and see that, you know, maybe they didn't have the best Google reviews or something like that. And, you know, I think don't get discouraged if a veterinarian will see your animals, but they are open and honest with you. You know, like I said, if I bring in a lemur leaf frog, I'm not going to expect a veterinarian to know what that species is. But same thing, I am more than willing to educate and work with y'all, but you know some basic amphibian anatomy.
Right.
Y'all have done amphibian medicine, so that's where I get that confidence to work with them. If they're willing to work with you as the pet owner, and you have a good understanding of your animal, what your animal needs. So I think that's a really good basis of getting that level of comfortability and trust with your exotic veterinarian.
Like you said, it's going to be easier in the bigger cities. So if you're here and you're in Houston, for example, and someone's not comfortable handling a bird, there's plenty of choices.
Right.
Right. If you're in the middle of nowhere and they aren't sure how to handle them, and you do know how to handle them, you have to. Some of them, you literally have to start. You have to really work with them, right? So that's harder.
Patience.
At that point in time, it's harder, right? Your animal needs help.
Right.
So that's harder because it's too late at that point to start training them when you would like to be able to train. I hate to say it that way. You kind of train your vet if you're in a smaller area, less populous area. Sometimes you got to say, look, here's what I got.
Yeah.
So maybe you're going in for grooming or exam or whatever it's going to be. Start getting a feel for their comfort level. So if you're not comfortable handling it, you're out of luck when you're trying to get out of the box, as it were.
Right.
Because you, like you said, you lose them trying to handle them inappropriately.
Right. And I think another important aspect people need to keep in mind, even before you really start getting into exotics, is just keep in mind there's a good possibility you're going to have to travel to get to a veterinarian. So if that's just out of the question for you or unrealistic, maybe it's not in your best interest to keep exotic animals because y'all, they need care. Like we talked about, you know, in part one of this, so many people forego the annual basic checkup care and just wait until they're on death's doorstep. That's not a good way to go. Like we're in Texas, you know, I have a friend that lives out in the boonies and he has to drive 3 hours just to get to his vet. But you know what? He does it. He has that good rapport with the veterinarian and he cares about the animals. And so I think it's important to keep that in the back of your mind. You know, whether it's a hamster that's going to live 1 or 2 years or your hyacinth macaw, just have realistic expectations all the way around. And kind of the thing that I think I want to end this segment on that I've experienced and I've heard a lot of people experience as well is another reason to either go or choose not to go to a vet that may say they'll see exotics is it just one vet in the entire building that will see exotics, but none of the other vets will touch them, none of the staff is properly trained,
Yeah.
And I think it's important to kind of understand that and how that can have negative consequences as well.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, certainly. If you have you have an opportunity, it'd be nice to have more than one veterinarian in the building, at least available at that practice. And the challenge comes if you have something hospitalized. It's only one veterinarian and maybe one technician sometimes. If they're not there and the animal's hospitalized, managing that care is hard. So if you have a choice, it's nicer to have veterinarians, more than one veterinarian in a practice that sees exotic animals. So when I started this particular practice, my mantra was, I'm not going to hire if you don't do exotic animals, because I see enough that if I was the only one that saw them, I would never have time off.
You'd be working 24/7.
Yeah, and that's why, and thus burnout, right? So when I first started, I used to take them home, right? Because I was at a practice where I was the only veterinarian that saw exotics, and I learned very quickly that I can't service my patients very well if I'm the only one there. So that really makes it tough. So it's nice not to have that as a setup.
Right. And the big things that come to mind for me, because like I said, I've experienced this myself and I've learned so much from you. You know, he has 4 veterinarians that are well versed in exotic medicine. I think you've had 4 vets for a very long time. And you know, tying back into the biggest complaint is, oh, exotic vet med is so expensive. Y'all, you're gonna get more bang for your buck, so to speak, if you go to a clinic that does specialize in exotics and has multiple vets that are well versed in them. Because I cannot tell you how many cases I've seen where they do, you know, radiographs or an ultrasound on, you know, a chicken or a ferret. They're in surgery. Y'all, your animal is going to be in the best hands when there's multiple people that know what they're doing with them.
Right.
And so, you know, I've seen you scrub in surgery with other vets working on birds here just to make sure that bird is in the best care possible,
right,
getting the best medicine possible. Same thing, you know, a lot of vets will charge for like radiograph consultation fees, that kind of thing. And if you're the only vet that even knows what you're looking at anatomically on a bird x-ray, that's just one brain on the case.
Yeah.
But here you have 4.
Yeah.
And so that definitely adds to the value for people that maybe you don't necessarily think about as a pet parent new to this.
Yeah. And hopefully as you get more expertise in your vet, you have a shorter time from first visit to diagnosis and treatment, appropriate treatment, right? So that's part of the other challenge, right? The key is to go from start to finish for a lot of these ones as quick as possible, because we don't have much time with them.
Right, more limited time frame than a dog or a cat a lot of times. And then the other thing too we've kind of briefly touched on is not just relying on the vets, but the actual staff as well. You know, whether it's the customer service reps up front making the appointment. You know, if you make a 15-minute appointment for a brand new parrot and it's the first time they've had a parrot,
that's not going to work.
Things go behind very quickly. And then the technical staff behind the scenes or, you know, taking history in the room, it's really important that they're adequately trained as well. You know, going back, this all ties in together. The restraining, a lot of times we're the ones restraining the animals. And you don't want somebody that doesn't know how to do it, hasn't been trained properly, or isn't comfortable and confident doing it. Because the vets, y'all can't do it all by yourself.
Right.
You have to rely on your support staff.
Right. Well, plus they're running lab work, right? That's specific to that species. So there's a lot of depth to the technicians on trying to get that set of diagnostics, both physical exam diagnostics, like I said, history is a diagnostic tool, and then diagnostic tests in the lab, blood work or stool samples.
And especially when you do get into those emergency situations, or especially surgery, you know, just like y'all have to know what's within normal limits for them. A lot of times we do too, because we're the ones that are monitoring them. We're the ones making sure you have the right tools, because at the end of the day, we want y'all's focus to be on the surgery and the animal.
Which makes it way nicer, right?
Exactly. And making sure it goes as smoothly as possible.
Yep.
And, you know, we need to be trained and understand that as well. So I say that because I've, you know, been to clinics dropping off other animals, and once again, it goes back to the realistic expectations. If you come in with a wallaby, It's not an animal you see every day.
Have a book, right?
But, if somebody comes through the door, for instance, I went to a vet clinic once with a blue-tongued skink. In my world, that's a very, very common reptile, very common popular pet reptile. And literally the only person that even knew what it was the one veterinarian that was seeing it. And all of the staff came rushing out, kind of bull rush me like, oh my God, what is this? What is this? That didn't really give me the best confidence in the clinic of like, oh, y'all are like, none of you know what this animal is, but you're going to be treating it. So I think those are all really important takeaway messages to finding a good exotic vet and building that rapport with them, that trust, and still maintaining the realistic expectations.
Yep.
That y'all are people. You're not encyclopedias. You are not going to know the answer to every single animal-related question that comes in. And I think a lot of people expect y'all to be veterinarians, zookeepers, biologists, husbandry experts, just everything all in one.
Goodness is you can find that word together, right? That's our mission is not only know it, but know, hopefully, for us to know where to find out, right? So that's helpful.
All right, y'all. Well, I hope this helped any of you in your search for an experienced, qualified exotic veterinarian. Maybe put a little bit of perspective about what to expect going to a new one, or what to keep in mind as far as building your relationship and maintaining a good relationship with them. But we'll catch y'all on the next one. Next one is going to go a little bit more in depth about unique challenges of treating exotics. So I hope y'all enjoy it, and catch you guys on the next one.